So the first question we have is just in short, why have you been invited to the conference, or what's your personal take on European commemoration?
Well, at first I wasn't sure why I was invited, because my work is in creative writing. I'm about to publish a novel, and the novel is about Russian oligarchs in London, so it has nothing whatsoever to do with the First World War. But then I realized that in fact it is my earlier work which has to do with the Balkans and the way the Balkans are perceived in Western European culture, but particularly at the time around the late 19th, early 20th century. So actually, in a way, it is a very good idea that I'm invited, because I feel that Eastern Europe and Southern Europe is rather neglected in this whole year of European commemoration, that particularly in Britain where I live, all the talk is about the Western Front, and very often you'd completely forget that anything was even going on in the part of the world that I study.
You already touched upon it. You'll be chairing the culture track. What do you think are the most pressing issues in terms of culture?
The most pressing issues perhaps are to make sure that we know about the way the First World War, but Second World War too, are represented in different cultures and different traditions. There is a tendency in each one of European nationalities to freeze the idea of the First World War in perhaps a couple of great works or poems that we learn at school. So there is a lot to discover within each national tradition, but there is also a lot to work on in order to create a kind of shared European tradition. You know, along the lines of Remarque's novels, which are known across Europe, there are many others to discover. So I very much look forward to the fact that we have an Italian writer here talking about the Italian tradition. We have a Dutch writer. We have me from Serbia, but now working in Britain, and it will be an Estonian. It will be a kind of cross-national dialogue, which is really very, very good. I attended a number of these conferences about the First World War, and even when they had a European spin or slant, they tended to be less international than what we have here today.
You already touched upon it a bit. How do you think that a conference like this can contribute to maybe uplift those more marginalized memory cultures?
Well, I think we started with that last night. I was really impressed by the fact that, in fact, what we discussed in the opening ceremony, but very often the diaries and the testimonies of ordinary people, so the kind of documentary evidence, if you want. And I teach life writing, memoirs, biographies, etc. So I'm actually very pleased that that kind of text is being rediscovered. So we weren't talking about generals last night, and we weren't talking about big-name politicians. It was actually rediscovering a long-lost oral tradition and in written tradition much less well-known texts. So I'm hoping that a slightly unfamiliar story of World War I will emerge from what we are discussing today.
So perhaps starting from that, what are your general expectations for the conference?
In a way, I've just said it, that we will rediscover. We think we know what the First World War is about and what the key questions are, but I think what was already beginning to emerge is a slightly different angle on these things. So I think we will rediscover a new story behind very well-known and well-trodden events and discussions.
Then finally, how do you think that a conference like this one can perhaps contribute to keeping the topic of European commemoration and also commemoration of memories that are perhaps not as popular or not as visible beyond this year of commemoration 2014?
It's now, I come from Serbia originally, and Serbia is only now beginning to discover a way of commemorating the First World War, because for a long time within Yugoslavia, the First World War was not a war we ever talked about. The Second World War was glorious. Then I have lived now for 30 years in Britain, where the First World War sounds like the only war. In a way, it's the main one that is commemorated. So you have these two opposing traditions. And for me, even having this conference in Germany is a very important third point of that triangle. So even if I just heard about German ways of commemorating things, it would be new and eye-opening for me. But the fact that we're trying to create a European discourse here on one level it looks utopian because a lot of these national stories are the dominant stories, but on another level, already what I heard tonight, and I think even more what is coming today, is actually very promising, because people didn't agree. We don't have to agree, but talking about the past using a kind of shared cultural vocabulary is already a way towards agreement. So I think even if we continue, as we did last night for a couple of hours, today just discussing our parallel visions, the parallel vision is already one vision in some ways.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.